Well, and this afternoon, the Ghana AIDS Commission is urging Ghanaians to take necessary precautions to avoid contracting HIV. The latest data released by the Commission shows that some 23,495 people tested positive for the virus in the first half of the year. Data analyst with our research desk, Isaac Ofieje, will be joining us shortly with more on the figures being released by the AIDS Commission on this. But first of all, there's a need for us to hear from the AIDS Commission on what's accounting for the surge in the figures. Also in the Ashanti region, a lot of people have been sharing their concerns on revelations that there appears to be a surge in the figures.
Go to the barbering shop, the tools they are using. So the first thing is abstinence. The second is me getting my own barbering tools. I have a machine I used to shave. When I'm going to the barbering shop, I carry my own machine. Scissors, comb, and other tools.
I am being faithful. You know, it's A, B, C. A for abstain, B for being faithful, and C, condomize. So I am doing the B, being faithful. I make sure, for me personally, when I go to the barbering shop, I make sure their equipment that they use for barbering is being sterilized, like thoroughly sterilized before they use it on me. Sometimes I go with my own clippers.
Measures or precautions given to the general public. So it's either you stay, like, you prevent yourself from doing things you're not supposed to do.
Which are some of the things?
Like, using contraceptives, or you stay chaste till marriage before you indulge yourself into such activities like slow sex to prevent HIV.
Okay. Thank you.
And I am married, so I do not do any woman issue, no womanizing. I'm stuck to my wife. I equally have my personal barber who mostly comes to my place. I have this man shaving everything, you understand? So the only advice I would advise my fellow friends is just stick to your partner, condomize, and make sure you are protected. It's real. I know, I think basically it's 23,000 and beyond, right? Yeah. But what do we have to do? The pleasure we cannot avoid. So all you need to do is just condomize when necessary.
I've been hearing this on radio and on TV. That is the media that we should ensure personal hygiene. That is, you shouldn't use any blade your fellow has used. If you do that, you can contract that kind of virus. That is HIV virus. Once I'm not married, I don't engage in premarital sex, so I'm free.
Oh, I've not really heard about it being on the rise.
So what are you doing to protect yourself?
Okay, what we learned from school is that we shouldn't share sharp objects. That I have had as a habit. You know, so when I go to the salon, I make sure that the things that are being used on me are sterilized. And I also don't share sharp objects like blade and stuff. So I've had that habit on me since, say primary school to the uni. So I don't do anything that will put me at risk as far as HIV AIDS is concerned.
Well, data analyst with our JoyNews research desk, Ofieje, is joining me in studio just to break down the figures for you and paint that national outlook for you and what's happening in terms of the infection rate. Kofi is joining us at this time, and we'll be putting the figures on your screens right now. But let's start off with how we arrived at the 23,000. It appears that there's a slight drop in the figures from what we experienced last year.
Well, although there's a slight drop, but if you do the year-on-year analysis, right from 2019 to 2021, you could see slight, increase in terms of the population living with HIV. So on your screen now is the 2019 population, which is 342,307, people living with HIV/AIDS. This increase to 346,122 in 2020, and now 2021. This is the current population we have. The estimated population is around 350,000. Now, if you look at the first quarter of 2022, we've recorded close to over 23,000, and this is a decline from the 25,000 we recorded in the first half of 2021. But just like we are saying in terms of the trend analysis, you can actually see that right from 2019 to 2021, we've been seeing slight, increment in terms of the population. So it increased by more than 2% from 2019 to 2021. And we've also seen an increase about 1.24% from 2020 to 2021. So there you have it, the statistics for you in terms of the HIV population. Although the first half of the year, 2022, has recorded some decline, the historical data in terms of the year-on-year analysis shows that you've seen this marginal increments over the years from 2.4% if you compare 2019 to 2021, and then 1.24% 2019 to 2020.
Do we have a clear idea of the regional breakdown and what's this looking like for us as a country?
The regional breakdown is actually more or less like uniform in the southern parts of the country. So we have places like the eastern region, the western region, but the regional breakdown is somewhat uniform when you look at the data.
And we'll be hearing from the AIDS Commission shortly. But then when you look at 2019, 2020 and 2021, there appears to be a steady increase. Is it correct to make that analysis?
Very correct.
But then there's a slight drop, or what you'd say a sharp drop in 2022. How about the restrictions and other issues we experienced during COVID? Is it a far-fetched factor to bring in to say, well, that's why we're not really experiencing the figures as you should be?
Well, it could be one of the factors, but COVID was actually very serious in 2020. But if you look at the data, the increment in terms of, if you compare the year-on-year from 2019 to 2020, you could see 2019 to 2020, the increase in terms of the population, the estimated population with HIV/AIDS was a bit higher than what we saw between 2020. And so you may be right, it could be one of the factors because we saw the growth rate in terms of the population, 2.4% between 2019 and 2021. But if you compare 2020 and 2021, there is a significant decline in terms of the growth rate from 2.4 to now 1.24 between these years under review.
Kofi AJ with our research desk. Let's hear from the AIDS Commission now on what it is that's accounting for this. In fact, some persons, they're sharing their concerns as to what they know even about the virus. So let me bring in the Director General of the Ghana AIDS Commission, Chairman Etiahini. Thank you so much for your time, sir. I also need to point out that also joining us is John Amoisi. He's a virologist. He will be helping us with his perspective on the clinical and aspects of all of this. But let me start off with you, Mr. Etiahini. What's accounting probably for this slight drop in the figures? Mr. Etiahini, if you're there with us, kindly unmute. I was just asking about the figures and what's accounting for the slight drop that we're witnessing.
So, well, I cannot hear anything from your end. I don't know if you can hear me, but I cannot hear anything from your end.
If you're with us, let me bring in John Amoisi now. He's a virologist. We're seeing a slight decline in the figures, 23,000. For you, what may be the causative factors as to why we're witnessing that slight drop?
Oh, no, thanks for that. And greetings to you from the KNUST in Kumasi. Just to set the record straight, I'm not a virologist, I'm a medical doctor, but I specialize in global health. And certainly HIV is one of the top global health issues. I did not quite hear your question because the line was not working, but I guess you're focusing on the 23,000 who have tested positive for the virus. I think it's an important discussion we're having, and I've always lamented, and I say this to my students, that the focus on HIV/AIDS has really dwindled over the past several years. Unlike back in the day when there was always a lot of talk about HIV/AIDS, a lot of educational campaigns and efforts to really reduce the impact of this disease. These days, there's almost radio silence on HIV AIDS, and I'm not surprised that we're seeing the kind of figures that we have now. I just want to really make an important point regarding a disease like HIV AIDS and why we need to appreciate it in context. I mean, it's a disease which, when you get, really, you have for life. And if the right measures are put in place, one can live a perfectly normal life, even when they have HIV/AIDS. The challenge is that once someone has HIV/AIDS, they also have the potential to spread it. And this is where the problem largely is. If it is spread and is not detected quickly, then people get sick and will ultimately die. And this is a problem. The double-edged sword about HIV and HIV/AIDS control comes from the fact that when HIV/AIDS control is put in place, what happens is that, well, if you're looking in terms of preventing the incidence or new cases of HIV/AIDS, it is good in its own self, because then you have less people over a period of time testing positive or getting HIV/AIDS. But at the same time, these efforts go along with, providing the right kind of treatment and access to testing for those with HIV/AIDS. And what this means is that those who have the virus will survive for longer, or they will live fairly normal lives. But that doesn't mean that they cannot infect others. So you are prolonging the lives of people, giving them a normal life. But that also means that your pool of people who will put others at risk will be pretty stable. And so you want to, at the same time, reduce the people who are testing positive, that's new people who are joining the pool. At the same time, you want to extend the lifespan of those who are already positive, almost giving them normal lives. So you need to combine the two efforts continually, both preventing people from getting the disease, as well as addressing those who already have it, who you're doing so well in providing them with the opportunity to live a normal life. You need to keep them in your radar, because then if they lose guard, so to speak, they could also infect others and then increase your pool of positive people. So it really is a double-edged sword. And I think HIV/AIDS is one of the really important diseases which we have to understand will be around for a very long time. And as much as possible, you want to keep your incidence numbers as low as possible, which may be a bit different from addressing your prevalence issues. So those would be my comments, and perhaps if you ask again your question, I could address any areas which I may have failed to address.
23,000 cases. It's not as though we're out of the woods yet. What should we be on the lookout for? That's a significant number, isn't it?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. I mean, it's 23,000 out of what? And if you look at the information that was provided, I think they made it clear what this pool of persons whom they tested was. I can't quite remember the figure off the top of my head, but out of that pool, definitely fairly significant. I would say it really is the tip of the iceberg. And then perhaps if we do a more national level kind of prevalence estimate, we might get maybe larger figures, maybe smaller figures. But given that this was done scientifically, it could be fairly representative of what's happening in the country. You also need to understand that these prevalence numbers would differ significantly from region to region, and so it's important that whatever efforts are put in place are also very specific to the different parts of the country and the various demographics, and therefore what the risks may be. And I know that the Ghana AIDS Commission, the Ministry of Health, Ghana Health Service really are on top of this. They have the most accurate figures, and there's a lot of effort going on both to prevent the incidence of the disease as well as to provide the best health care to those who already have the disease. My focus mainly is on the seeming quietness around HIV/AIDS in the public eye, and this perception that it's not so much a problem as it was in the 90s. It remains a problem, and we still need to give it that visibility that it demands, especially because now we can keep people living fairly normalized with HIV/AIDS, which means that then they have the capacity to infect others if the right measures are not put in place and the visibility regarding the risks for the disease is not there. So really important to keep it in the public eye.
There's that fear that COVID-19 could have distorted the figures. It's not as though we're praying that the figures keep surging, but if you look at the trajectory way from 2019 up until 2021, the figures kept going up. The fear is that COVID-19 could have pushed away a lot more people from at least assessing health facilities, which would then make it possible for the AIDS Commission to capture all of these people into the database. Is that a far-fetched assertion?
Well, I would say we don't know. Now, the reason is this. I know that the Ghana AIDS Commission, and they can speak better for themselves, the surveys that they conduct to arrive at these prevalence estimates are not just limited to hospital data. They collect data from all over the place. So the hospital is not the only place where we get this information. That notwithstanding, your assertion regarding the distortion of figures on account of COVID is not only for HIV/AIDS, for many other diseases, malaria and all the others. We saw how COVID-19 really distorted these figures. It's difficult to tell whether these were artificial or real, but every focus was now on COVID-19. That's one thing. The other thing was health-seeking behavior. That's the way we put it technically. Also changed during COVID. People's decisions regarding going to the hospital changed based on what they perceive to be a risk by going to a health facility or otherwise. So it will take some time for us to really understand the impact of COVID on other diseases, not in terms of its real incidence, but our ability to estimate. And this speaks to the fact that we need to have a more comprehensive surveillance system for diseases in general, not just HIV/AIDS, because relying on hospital data alone does not provide you the real picture. It will only give you the picture of those who came to facilities. And so what you really want is some kind of community-based type of surveillance activity. But as I mentioned before, with HIV/AIDS, the Ghana AIDS Commission, Ghana Health Service, Ministry of Health really has been on top of that ball in measuring the incidence and prevalence estimates, which I believe are pretty accurate.
And this is where, John, you'd have to hold on for us. Just stay with us. So let's bring in the Director General of the Ghana AIDS Commission, Chairman Etuahini. Thank you, sir, for your time. The factors accounting for the 23,000, I guess, is something we need to take a look at.
Right. Thank you for having me. Actually, the 23,495 that we are talking about is actually data from HIV tests during the period under reference. Now, it is data testing was conducted in health facilities, in communities, and these both community level data and health facility data give us this figure. And so it clearly shows that, as you pointed out earlier on, that looking at the trend from 2019 till now, you can see that the number of positive cases is going down. And that's a reflection of the fact that as Dr. Moasi said, the efforts we are making both in preventing and managing the conditions of people living with HIV actually working. And I will illustrate this by pointing out that new infections of HIV in the country is also on a downward trend. Over the last 5 years or so, we can talk of 2017 to 2021, new infections reduced by 26%. AIDS deaths have also reduced by 38% within the same period. What that tells us is that the treatment program is working well, because when people who are on treatment and are virally suppressed cannot transmit the virus to their partner sexually, It also means that it prevents people from developing AIDS and dying if they do not get treatment. And so with AIDS deaths also coming down shows that the treatment is actually working.
And in the context of that, I'm now being focused on the 23,000. It's as though we're very much fixated on the larger population and asking them to abstain and to observe some precautions. But where lies the hope for these 23,000 people? And what efforts are you putting in place as the Ghana AIDS Commission just to try and give them hope at least?
Okay, so I would like to point out that we have estimated 100,000 people who live with HIV but have not tested. And so they don't know their HIV status. So with the 23,000 getting to know, being diagnosed and getting to know their status, for me is a positive thing that we should encourage others to do, because it's helping us to pick the cases that we do not know. And the objective of the national response is actually to diagnose at least 95% of people living with HIV and put 95% of those diagnosed on antiretroviral treatment, and expect that they will be supported to adhere to treatment and attain viral suppression. And when they are virally suppressed, then we have the hope that we will be able to end AIDS as our national strategy expects us to achieve. And we shall also achieve epidemic control, because they cannot, virally suppressed individuals cannot transmit the virus sexually, and they will not develop AIDS. And so with this goal in mind, we will want to, commend every effort that individuals who live with HIV but have not been diagnosed to do the test. And the test is free. You don't pay anything to get tested. And so it is very important that those who have never tested at all go and test.
I'm interested in knowing a lot more about the mode of transmission, even before we get into the testing regime. And I recall that about a year or two ago, you were concerned and alarmed that we have overaged men having transactional sex, and that's becoming one of the breeding grounds for the virus. In this latest report that you're putting out there, has this trend changed, or perhaps it's still the same?
Well, it's human behavior, and we cannot say it's changed because we haven't seen any data that suggests that has changed. But it's not only what we call sugar daddy, sugar mommy kind of situation in the country, or age mixing so far as sex is concerned.
Yeah, but is that a major factor? Is it still a major factor?
I think we can put it this way. There are various factors, and one of them, which I believe is a major factor, is concurrent multiple partnerships. That is one where one person has more than one sexual partner. And these days, that individuals can have 3, 4, 5 boyfriends or girlfriends. And another major factor is casual sex. Now, people are so liberated in their minds and can have sex at any time. And so when they meet for the first time, what comes into mind is sex, and they just have it without protection. So casual sex, concurrent multiple partnership, and even serial monogamy is also a challenge, where individuals, will stick to one person over a short time, they break up, and quickly they get into relationship with another, and it keeps going on. And in all these situations, they do not use condoms. And so unprotected sex is the major reason, because most people who live with HIV in Ghana got it through sexual transmission. That's about 80%. And so we know the risk, and we also have the protection. And so the protection, as we all know, the prevention methods are 3, A, B, C, D for short: abstinence, sticking to one uninfected partner, or using condoms. And if we stick to these 3, then we have the opportunity to stop sexual transmission. And besides that, the next risk is from mother to child transmission. And that one, antiretroviral medicines helps us to break that chain of transmission. And pregnant women are supported at the antenatal clinics to actually get tested. And when they test positive, they are supported to use the drugs. And we have thousands of babies or children who have been born to HIV positive mothers who are HIV negative. And so we know the prevention, we know our risk, and for each of the risks, we have the prevention tools. And so we have to use those prevention tools to protect ourselves from infection, because we're talking about 23,000. And we want to understand whether it's a concern or it's not. It is. Even one person getting HIV is a major concern, because as Dr. Amuasi said, that one person can give it to several others. And those several others can also give it to others. And so if we are not protecting ourselves using condoms or whatever protection, then the chain of transmission will continue, and all the efforts we have made will come to zero. And so we need to work together as a country. All of us should recognize our individual risks and try to reduce our risks or eliminate those risks completely.
Dr. Moise, I'll bring you in shortly, but it appears that Mr. Tuahini has left out the sugar. I'm actually asking that question because of the issue of transactional sex, which you gave some updates on about a year ago. That has not been touched on, I mean, in terms of the findings this year. Given the fact that we're even finding ourselves in a much more worse economic condition, there are fears that young girls may be exploited, and that could also be a point of infection.
That's absolutely correct. That is what we see every day in workplaces, in educational institutions, even in our homes. That is what is happening. And a number of young people do not have the option of getting something, especially the ladies, the option of getting something they deserve to get without, opening up their ties for a man, and it's creating a lot of psychological problems even for young ladies. And so it is something that we keep talking about, and I'm happy you have brought it up. Transactional sex is an important factor here, and the number of people who are involved is quite large. So it is that a number of people are into sex work, both male and female. And that is also a major risk factor. And unfortunately, some of the men who use the services of sex workers refuse to use condoms when even the sex workers themselves have offered the condoms for use. And sometimes they even become violent because they insist they are paying for it, and therefore they determine the terms of the arrangement. And so when one is giving a condom, it's only for the person's own interest to protect that person. And so we know that from what we have read in the graphic yesterday, we know that sex workers, and they are one of the group of people who are high risk and can spread the virus. And so we dedicate a lot of resources and efforts to work with them and ensure that they use condoms at all times. And sometimes they don't get the cooperation of their male partners. And of course, people are now trying other forms of sexual intercourse, including anal sex. And that is also high risk. It doesn't matter whether you are a woman who is having anal sex or a man having anal sex. It's both, in both ways, it is high risk.
Okay.
And people have to reduce their risk.
Dr. Mose, let me bring you in now. Let's talk about the way forward, achieving our targets, 95, 95, 95. I'll hear from you shortly, Zejani, on this one. But Doc, what's your take on achieving our targets and how do we get there?
No, I think it's a great question. I think this 95 target is talking about by the year 2025, you're looking at 95% of the population who are HIV positive, knowing their status. And then the second 95 is looking at also by the same year, 2025, the 95% of those who test positive for HIV to be on medication. And then the last 95 is that by 2025, you want 95% of those who are taking their medication to achieve viral suppression. And I believe that Dr. Chahine has expanded on this viral suppression and how powerful a tool it is, in the sense that people will still have the virus, but the virus is suppressed so that they cannot transmit it. It's perhaps the single most powerful aim that we seek for in order to break the epidemic of HIV/AIDS. But he also touched on a couple of things which, or he expanded on really the heart of the matter, which is behavior change. It's really a function of the way people behave. In terms of the way they go about having sex. And he rightly mentioned that the major mode of spreading is via sex. Of course, we know that there's, mother to child transmission, which can be very well controlled. We know there's transmission through blood transfusion, which is very rare these days and almost impossible in our current health system if all the steps are followed. And then also transmission via injection drug use, which also can be controlled in very innovative ways. But the key really here is behavior change. You cannot stop people from having sex. So the question is, how do you allow people to continue with their sexual activities, but in a way that does not increase their risk of HIV/AIDS getting it or of spreading it if they have it already?
Right.
And the most powerful way, which he rightly mentioned, is by the provision of condoms. Now, it's not just putting the condom on the table or even making it freely available, but making people aware of the risks that they face. And this is why this tool called behavior change on communication is so powerful when it comes to HIV/AIDS control. And I mentioned earlier in my submissions that the visibility that HIV/AIDS had in the 90s, that not necessarily the fear, but that knowledge that this is real, everybody is at risk. It's no longer there the way it used to be. The Ghana AIDS Commission continues to work really hard, Ghana Health Service, Ministry of Health, but we really would be relying a lot on the media, both traditional media, social media, to put HIV/AIDS out there. Of course, we want to tell people that you can live a normal life if you have it, but we need to put it out there that you are at risk, and a lot will depend on the behavior. So we put the condoms and the other measures on the table, but we also keep people aware that you've got to keep your eyes on that ball.
Let's talk about the curative. It's not a pleasant place to be, but what options are available? And we need to hear from the experts like you on what options are available for someone who may unfortunately get infected. Is it curable? That age-old question has come up again.
Well, I mean, the current scientific consensus in the general sense is that HIV/AIDS is not curable. Now, when we say curable, what we mean is that the virus will not disappear entirely from your system. But the argument would be, who really cares if you can live a normal life and also if you can be in a state where you cannot transmit the virus? And this is why I made mention of the fact that viral suppression is really a powerful thing we need to achieve. Because here, the virus has not completely disappeared, but it's so compressed or suppressed that it does not really affect your way of life, and it does not also, it wouldn't also be transmitted to others. And so I think the argument about whether it's curable or not is not as poignant an issue as it used to be before. Nonetheless, research is going on. There's always one news item here and there or there talking about how they've achieved some successful elimination of the virus from somebody's system, but there's no publicly available FDA-approved cure for HIV at the moment. The good thing is that access to testing, access to treatments in Ghana remains free, and making people aware of this so they're not afraid to test and also not afraid to go to health facilities for treatment and know where to go is so critical. And I know the Ghana Health AIDS Commission it has really been doing this over several decades, and I'm sure Dr. Tuahine can throw more light on exactly how this is being done.
Yeah, and I want to bring in Mr. Tuahine at this point. Even if we have some drugs dealing with the area of retrovirals, how affordable are they to the average person? Because I'm not sure that the virus is targeting a few rich people, but everyone is at risk. So how are you making these drugs available? And would you say that they're even free at this moment?
Yes, thank you for that question. Actually, the drugs are available in more than 500 health facilities, starting from teaching hospitals, regional hospitals, district hospitals, several polyclinics, and several health centers all across the country. It can be accessed for free. In fact, all HIV services in this country are for free. You don't pay anything. All you need is your national health insurance card, and it must be valid, and they will give you the free service. However, if you don't have national health insurance card or it's expired, you can still get the medicines free, but they will ask you to either renew or register with the national health insurance scheme. So that's all it takes. It's free everywhere. And people who have been on it are living normal lives, as Dr. Mwasi said. We have one lady, Dinah, that many Ghanaians know, right at the beginning of the multisectoral response. She was one of the familiar or usual faces that we always present to the public. And she has had HIV for about 30 years. And because of the antiretroviral treatment, she's still alive, healthy, and working. Nothing shows that she lives with HIV. In fact, it is because of the potency of the drugs that you hardly see anybody that shows AIDS symptoms. You hardly can see anyone. And so that is something that for me is very encouraging. Right. And therefore we encourage everybody that lives with HIV to accept the treatment.
I want to bring in now the issue
para-suppression status.
Right. I want to bring in now the issue about churches and religious grounds and how you are collaborating with them. It appears that just from some of the sounds we've heard from the Ashanti region, some persons raising concerns, superstitious concerns actually, about how the virus behaves. How are you working together, knowing that the Ghanaian population, majority of them belong to the Christian community? That's an organized area. How are you moving into the churches and trying to create more awareness on this?
Yeah, we have been in touch with the churches individually and also as a group. We've been talking to them and trying to see how we work together, because we've been working together for a long time now. But there appears to be some complacency, and therefore we have to strengthen our partnerships so that we can use the pulpit to reach out to the congregants by ensuring that they have access to testing and treatment services. And of course, prevention of mother-to-child services. And so we are working very closely with the churches and the Muslims. We are currently trying to have, religious bodies forum, a faith-based forum, where we will discuss all the issues and work together to ensure that all of them actively participate as we used to do in the past.
All right. Let me wrap up with you, Dr. Amoisi, on this. What's your final take as we look forward to the coming days and continue the fight against the virus?
No, thanks for that. My final take will really be to appeal to the media, both the traditional and social media, to really keep the spotlight on HIV/AIDS. The objective is to really break transmission and therefore being able to keep this disease.
Unfortunately, we've lost connection to Dr. Amoisi there, but thanks to Mr. Tuahini as well, Director General for the Ghana AIDS Commission. We take you now to the Ashanti region, but we'll do that after these messages.